Stop what you're doing right now, because what I'm about to tell you may be more important than the next prescription you fill, the next supplement someone tries to sell you, or even the next routine scan your doctor schedules. And I do not say that lightly. I say it because if you are over 50, cancer risk is no longer just about genetics, bad luck, or whether something dangerous shows up on a test. It is also about the internal conditions your body is living in every single day. Conditions that either help abnormal cells die early and quietly, or help them survive long enough to become your next nightmare. That is the part too many people are never taught. Most adults are told about cancer only in the language of detection. Get screened, watch for symptoms, catch it early, and yes, that matters. It matters tremendously. But there is another conversation that should happen long before disease is found, and for millions of people, it never does. That conversation is prevention at the cellular level. Not vague prevention, not try to be healthy, not generic advice that sounds good and changes nothing. I'm talking about the daily biological signals that decide whether your body becomes more inflamed or more stable, more vulnerable or more defensive, more chaotic or more resistant to disease. I'm Dr. Adrian, and after years of watching what happens when people wait too long to take these signals seriously, I need you to hear me clearly. Your body is not just aging, it is adapting to the instructions you give it, every day, with your sleep, with your food, with your movement, with your hydration, with your daily rhythm. And if those instructions are wrong, the damage does not always announce itself with pain. Sometimes it builds silently for years beneath the surface, while a person keeps telling themselves they feel mostly fine. That phrase, mostly fine, has misled more people than almost any diagnosis I know. Because mostly fine can coexist with rising inflammation. Mostly fine can coexist with impaired immune surveillance. Mostly fine can coexist with DNA damage not being repaired efficiently anymore. Mostly fine can coexist with the slow creation of an internal environment where cancer has an easier time taking hold. And here is why you need to stay with me to the very end of this. Long-term research following massive populations over decades has shown that certain daily habits, done consistently, are associated with dramatically lower cancer risk in adults over 50. Not slightly lower, not the kind of tiny improvement people use to sell headlines, dramatically lower. What I'm about to walk you through are 5 of the most powerful of those habits. And I'm ranking them deliberately, because this is not just a list of random tips. This is a sequence, a layered biological system. Each habit strengthens the next. Each one changes the terrain inside your body. Each one makes the environment less friendly to disease and more supportive of repair. And I need to warn you now, the number 1 habit on this list is the one most people over 60 are doing badly enough to cancel out half of their other efforts. So do not skip ahead. Because number 5 looks simple, number 4 looks ordinary, number 3 looks familiar, number 2 looks like just another food recommendation. And by the time we get to number 1, you will understand why so many decent, disciplined people still end up sick while believing they were doing everything right. Let's start with number 5. Number 5 is the habit almost everyone underestimates because it doesn't sound impressive. It doesn't come in a capsule. It doesn't have a celebrity attached to it. It does not feel sophisticated. And yet I have seen this one change the way an older body feels in a matter of days. Morning hydration, not coffee first, not, I'll drink later. Not a few distracted sips while you scroll your phone. I mean a full glass, ideally 16 to 20 ounces of water as soon as you wake up, before food, before caffeine, before the day begins pulling you away from yourself. Now I know some people hear that and immediately think, surely that cannot be one of the most important things on this list. That reaction is exactly why this habit gets neglected. Because after the age of 50, and especially after 60, the body's thirst signaling becomes less reliable. Many older adults are mildly dehydrated almost every day and do not know it. They do not feel severely thirsty. They are not fainting. They are simply functioning at a low-grade deficit. And over time, that deficit changes much more than people realize. Your blood becomes a little less efficient. Your kidneys work harder. Your tissues receive less optimal fluid support. Your bowels slow down. Your energy dips. Your head feels a little foggier. Your circulation is less ideal. And one of the most important systems affected is the lymphatic system. Now this matters, because the lymphatic system is part cleanup crew, part transportation system, part immune support network. It helps move immune cells. It helps clear waste. It helps drain excess fluid and cellular debris. It helps maintain order. But unlike blood, which has the heart to pump it, lymph depends heavily on fluid balance and body movement. When you wake up dehydrated and stay that way, lymphatic flow becomes less efficient. And when cleanup becomes less efficient, inflammatory garbage hangs around longer than it should. That is not just uncomfortable, that is biologically expensive. Cancer does not typically grow best in clean, well-regulated tissue. It grows more easily where there is chronic stress, chronic damage, chronic inflammation, and less efficient surveillance. I remember a man in his late 60s who came to see me convinced that his dragging energy and constant heaviness were simply signs of age. He was not irresponsible. He was not reckless. He was doing what many older adults do, trying to be reasonable while gradually accepting decline. Coffee in the morning, water later maybe. Fatigue he called normal. Constipation he called manageable. Mild headaches he ignored. A body that felt burdened, but never dramatic enough to make him alarmed. When we changed only two things at first, morning hydration and 10 minutes of light movement after waking, he came back looking like someone had quietly removed weight from his entire system. Not because water is magic, because chronic low-grade dehydration had been taxing everything. That is the difference I need you to understand. Some people are not broken, they are undersupported. So here is the protocol. Set the water out where you can see it. Make the decision the night before. When your feet hit the floor, drink it. Do not negotiate with yourself. Do not replace it with coffee and promise to catch up later. And if you want the full effect, walk for 5 to 10 minutes afterward. Around the house, down the driveway, through the yard, along the sidewalk. Nothing fancy, just motion. That movement helps activate lymphatic flow, improves circulation, and tells the body the day has begun in a state of function rather than congestion. That is number 5. It is basic. It is cheap. It is easy to dismiss, and it matters far more than people think. Now here is why you cannot stop there. Because once you improve flow, the next question becomes, what are you feeding the system that lives at the center of immunity, inflammation, and metabolic control? That brings me to number 4. Number 4 is fermented food. And before you roll your eyes and think this is just another trendy gut health obsession, let me say this clearly. The gut is not a side issue. In older adults, it is one of the central battlegrounds of health. Your gut is not simply where food goes. It is where information gets processed. It is where the immune system is trained. It is where inflammatory signals can be amplified or calmed. It is where the body decides, to a surprising extent, how safe or unsafe the internal environment is. And as we age, several things begin to shift in the wrong direction. Microbial diversity often declines. Digestion becomes less resilient. The gut lining can become more permeable. Immune signaling becomes less precise. And the result is something millions of people live with without ever naming correctly. A body that feels inflamed, reactive, tired, and less stable than it used to. That is not just about comfort, it is about terrain. Because when the gut ecosystem weakens, inflammatory chemicals can leak more easily into circulation. The body becomes more irritated, more immunologically confused, more metabolically disturbed. It is like trying to run a clean city with a damaged waste system and unreliable communication. I had a patient in her upper 60s who did many things right. She cooked at home. She avoided obvious junk. She kept up with appointments. And yet her inflammatory markers stayed elevated year after year. She was tired, puffy, discouraged, and beginning to believe that aging simply meant feeling vaguely unwell forever. When we looked closely, her diet was clean in the most superficial sense, but biologically empty in one crucial area. No fermented foods, no real microbial replenishment, no consistent support for the internal ecosystem that helps regulate inflammation. We introduced plain yogurt with live cultures, then kefir, then small portions of fermented vegetables she could tolerate easily. Nothing dramatic, no impossible protocol, just daily repetition. What changed first was not a lab result. It was her face. The dull exhaustion softened. Then her digestion improved. Then her bloating decreased. Then her inflammatory markers finally began to move in the right direction. That matters because sometimes people think their body is failing them, when in reality their body has simply not been given what it needs to regulate properly. Fermented foods help restore beneficial bacteria. Those bacteria, in turn, help produce compounds that protect the gut lining, support immune balance, and reduce inflammatory burden. One of the most important is butyrate, a short-chain fatty acid that helps maintain the health of colon cells and influences how inflammation behaves in the body. And if you are worried about colon health, immune decline, chronic inflammation, or the slow sense that your body is becoming more hostile to you, this matters a great deal. Now there is a detail here that too many people miss. Fermented foods work best when they are not trying to operate alone. They need support. They need fiber. They need prebiotic foods. Garlic, onions, leeks, beans, oats, lentils, vegetables. Foods that feed the bacteria you are trying to encourage. Because introducing good bacteria without feeding them is like moving strong workers into a town with no infrastructure and expecting them to thrive. This is how cancer prevention really works at the daily level. Not with one miracle, with cooperation. Hydration supports flow. Fermented foods support immune and inflammatory control. One step prepares the next. And now we come to number 3. This is where most people think they already know what I'm going to say. And that confidence causes them to miss the entire point. Yes, number 3 is walking. But not the weak, accidental version of it. Not the I parked far away from the store version. Not the distracted shuffle people perform while telling themselves it counts. I'm talking about structured, moderate-intensity walking that changes metabolism. Here is why this matters after 50 in a way that becomes almost impossible to overstate. As you age, your body becomes less forgiving of inactivity. Insulin sensitivity often worsens. Muscle mass declines. Mitochondrial function becomes less efficient. Circulation can weaken. Glucose handling changes. The body becomes easier to inflame and harder to stabilize. That is not a motivational slogan. That is aging biology. And cancer thrives in biological chaos. Not just one kind of chaos. Metabolic chaos, inflammatory chaos, hormonal chaos, circadian chaos. Walking, when done properly and consistently, pushes back against several of those at once. When you walk at a pace that elevates your heart rate but still allows conversation, you improve blood sugar control, you improve insulin sensitivity, you increase oxygen delivery, you support circulation, you help regulate body composition, you activate muscle, you strengthen mitochondria, you reduce inflammatory burden. That is not just good exercise. That is a direct improvement in the internal conditions abnormal cells must live in. I want you to think about this carefully. The body is always deciding what kind of environment it is maintaining. Is it a stagnant environment, an inflamed one, an overfed one, a low oxygen, low movement, poorly regulated one? Or is it a body where fuel is handled better, tissues are better perfused, mitochondria are more active, and inflammatory signals are lower? Those two environments are not equally safe. I worked with a retired school teacher in his early 70s after a precancerous finding scared him badly enough to finally change. He told me something I will never forget. He said, "I always thought the serious version of my health would begin later. As if there would always be a cleaner, safer future moment to finally get disciplined. That illusion destroys people. Because later has a way of arriving as a diagnosis. We started with walking. Not because it was the only thing he needed, but because it was the most believable daily commitment he could sustain. 35 to 40 minutes, 5 days a week, ideally in the morning. No perfection, no athletic identity required, just consistency. The changes came in layers. First energy, then sleep, then appetite control, then weight, then mood, then lab markers, then a kind of confidence I see only when people stop feeling helpless inside their own body. That is one of the hidden gifts of walking. It does not just change physiology, it changes relationship. A person who walks consistently often begins thinking differently, eating differently, sleeping differently, living differently. One good signal makes the next one easier. And if you can do it outside in morning light, the benefits multiply because you begin anchoring the body's circadian rhythm. Morning sunlight helps tell the brain what time the day is, which influences cortisol timing, melatonin timing, alertness, metabolism, and, very importantly, the quality of sleep later that night. Hold on to that point, because the number one habit on this list depends on it more than most people realize. But before we go there, I need to talk to you about number 2. And this one is where people who think they are eating healthy enough often discover that they have been missing one of the most powerful food categories for cellular defense. Number 2 is cruciferous vegetables, especially broccoli sprouts, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, cabbage, arugula, radishes, and related foods. Now, the lazy version of this advice would simply say, vegetables are healthy, so eat more vegetables. That is not good enough. The real reason these foods matter is because of what they activate. They contain compounds that help switch on protective pathways inside the body, pathways involved in detoxification, antioxidant defense, inflammatory regulation, and cellular stress response. One of the most discussed compounds in this group is sulforaphane, especially abundant in broccoli sprouts. And sulforaphane matters because it helps activate systems that protect cells when they are under threat. It supports the body's ability to neutralize damage, process harmful compounds, and maintain a more orderly cellular environment. Let me put that more simply. Cells are under attack all the time. From oxidative stress, from metabolic stress, from inflammatory stress, from environmental exposures, from the simple wear of living. The question is not whether damage happens, it does. The question is whether the body can respond well enough and early enough to keep that damage from becoming something more dangerous. Cruciferous vegetables help support that response. But there is a crucial preparation detail here that separates people who are technically eating the food from people who are actually getting the strongest benefit from it. How you prepare these vegetables matters. If they are overcooked, boiled into softness, destroyed by heat, or treated carelessly, some of the enzymes and precursors involved in forming beneficial compounds are significantly reduced. In other words, the food remains healthy, but one of its most valuable protective mechanisms gets weakened. This is why broccoli sprouts are so potent. This is why lightly steaming often makes more sense than cooking the life out of broccoli. This is why chopping cruciferous vegetables and letting them sit briefly before heating them can matter. I remember a woman who had been proudly eating vegetables every evening for years and was frustrated that her overall health still felt less stable than she expected. She assumed she was doing everything right, and that maybe her body simply was not responsive anymore. But when we walked through the details, it turned out almost every cruciferous vegetable in her life had been cooked to exhaustion. She was not wrong in principle, she was just missing the mechanism. And that distinction matters deeply, emotionally, and practically. Because too many people feel blamed by health advice when what they actually need is precision. They do not need more guilt, they need better leverage. So here is the leverage. Get cruciferous vegetables into your routine consistently. Use broccoli sprouts when you can. Lightly steam rather than overboil. Chop them in advance when practical. Pair them with a meal pattern you can sustain. Do not rely on occasional effort. Make them part of the weekly architecture of your life, because daily cellular defense is built from repetition, not intention. Now we come to number 1. This is the habit people sacrifice first, defend most stubbornly, and regret only when the consequences become impossible to ignore. Sleep. Not lying in bed, not being tired, not sort of resting. I mean deep, regular, protected sleep in a body that knows when day is and when night is. Why is this number 1? Because sleep is the master condition. It influences everything else on this list. When sleep is poor, hunger becomes less regulated. Inflammation rises, blood sugar control worsens, immune function becomes less precise. Hormonal signaling is thrown off. Tissue repair becomes less efficient. Mood worsens, decision-making weakens. And perhaps most dangerously, people continue functioning just enough to convince themselves nothing serious is wrong. That is one of the cruelest parts of sleep deprivation. It lets you deteriorate while staying operational. During deep sleep, the body enters one of its most important states of repair and regulation. The immune system behaves differently. Hormonal rhythms shift. The brain clears waste more efficiently. Melatonin rises in darkness. Cellular recovery becomes more active. Night is when the body does some of its most important repair work, but that repair depends on conditions, and after 50, those conditions become easier to disrupt. Melatonin production often declines with age. Sleep becomes lighter. Waking becomes more frequent. People begin using screens later. They snack closer to bedtime. They fall asleep with the television on. They keep irregular sleep schedules. They drink to sedate themselves. They tell themselves they can get by on less. And over time, they unknowingly weaken one of the body's most powerful anti-cancer and anti-aging systems. I remember a retired nurse in her early 70s who had reduced her expectations of sleep so drastically that she thought 5 broken hours a night was simply who she was now. She wore it almost like a badge. I've always been able to function. That was her phrase. Function. Again, functioning is not healing. Her face looked tense even when she smiled. Her body looked like it had not fully exhaled in years. Her energy was brittle, her stress was high, her mood was flatter than she realized, and underneath it all was a body no longer getting enough uninterrupted time in the state where repair is supposed to happen. We built a sleep protocol, and I want you to listen carefully because this is where many people fail by looking for complexity instead of discipline. Same bedtime, same wake time, cool room, dark room, no bright screens late at night, no heavy meal close to bed, morning light every day. A wind-down routine that told the body, clearly and consistently, that the day was over. Not glamorous, not complicated, and profoundly effective. The first thing that changed was not even a lab result. It was the softness in her eyes. Then came better energy, then steadier mood. Then better appetite regulation, then downstream improvements that finally made the rest of her health plan work the way it was supposed to. That is why sleep is number 1, because if you improve sleep, you improve the likelihood that the body can carry out the rest of its protective work. Hydration works better in a body with better hormonal balance. Walking feels easier in a body that is better recovered. Gut health becomes more stable in a body with a stronger circadian rhythm. Metabolic control improves. Inflammatory burden often decreases. Repair becomes more efficient. Sleep is the amplifier, and if you are trying to do everything else while sleeping badly, you are trying to build health on a cracked foundation. Now let me make this painfully practical. If you are over 50, protect your sleep like it is part of your treatment plan because biologically it is. Set a bedtime that repeats, not one based on entertainment, not one based on mood, a real time. Wake at the same time most days. Get light in your eyes in the morning. Keep the room cool. Keep the room dark. Reduce late-night stimulation. Stop normalizing exhaustion. Stop treating sleep deprivation like a personality trait. Fatigue is data. Broken sleep is data. Nighttime wakefulness is data. Your body is speaking. And what it is often saying is that recovery is not winning. Now step back with me for a moment. What have we built? Number 5, morning hydration, because the body needs flow, circulation, and clearance before the day even begins. Number 4, fermented foods, because immune intelligence and inflammatory control depend heavily on the ecosystem in the gut. Number 3, metabolic walking, because movement changes glucose handling, circulation, oxygen delivery, mitochondrial function, and inflammatory burden. Number 2, cruciferous vegetables, because cells need support to defend, detoxify, and regulate under stress. And number 1, sleep, because repair, rhythm, hormonal coordination, and immune surveillance all depend on it. This is not a list of trendy habits. It is a daily anti-chaos system. And that matters because cancer risk rises where biological chaos rises. When inflammation is high, when metabolism is disordered, when circadian rhythm is broken, when immune surveillance is weak, when tissue repair is poor, when sleep is damaged, when movement is minimal, when daily life keeps sending the body one message: survive this, somehow. I want to speak directly now to the person listening who feels a quiet fear in their chest. Maybe cancer runs in your family. Maybe you have already had a scare. Maybe you are hearing all of this and thinking about the nights you sleep badly, the walks you never took, the foods you keep meaning to add, the low-grade fatigue you have been pretending is normal. And maybe part of you is already trying to turn this off emotionally by saying, well, maybe it's too late for me anyway. Listen to me very carefully. It is not too late to improve the environment your body lives in. You are not too late to reduce inflammation. You are not too late to restore rhythm. You are not too late to support detoxification. You are not too late to strengthen your metabolic state. You are not too late to build a body that is more resistant than the one you have today. No honest doctor can promise you invincibility. That would be dishonest. But I can tell you something powerful and true. Your body remains responsive. At 55, at 65, at 75, often beyond. The body is not static. It listens, it adapts, it changes in response to repeated signals. That is not motivational fluff. That is physiology. And the danger for most people is not that they are doomed. It is that they keep waiting, waiting for more certainty, waiting for a stronger scare, waiting for the right time, waiting until discomfort becomes undeniable, waiting until prevention has already become damage control. Do not do that to yourself. Start small, but start with seriousness. Tomorrow morning, drink the water, move your body, feed your gut, put protective foods on the plate, guard your sleep tonight. Do not aim for perfect, aim for repeatable. Because the people who age best are usually not the people chasing the most extreme answers. They are the people who finally understand the power of the basics and stop treating them like optional details. That is the real divide. Not who cares and who does not, but who understands and who keeps dismissing. Once you understand what these habits are really doing, you cannot unsee it. A glass of water is no longer just a glass of water. A walk is no longer just a walk. Sleep is no longer just sleep. Food is no longer just food. They are instructions. And every single day, you are giving your body instructions. The question is whether those instructions are moving you toward resilience or toward vulnerability. I want you to imagine something for a moment. Imagine waking up 6 months from now in a body that feels lighter, steadier, cleaner, more responsive. Not perfect, not magically transformed, but different in the ways that matter. Better sleep, better energy, better digestion, better control, better confidence. The sense that your body is no longer something you are apologizing for or fearing every day. The sense that you are finally cooperating with it instead of confusing it. That future does not begin with a miracle. It begins with sequence, water, movement, microbial support, protective foods, sleep, repeated, protected, respected. That is how health changes in real life, quietly, incrementally. Until one day your lab work looks different, your mornings feel different, your mind feels clearer, your body feels safer to live in. And the future feels less like a looming threat and more like something you still have a meaningful hand in shaping. So do not leave this video with inspiration and no structure. Leave with a decision. Pick the first habit you will lock in tomorrow, then the second, then the third. Because the body rarely changes from one giant promise. It changes from repeated, believable acts of alignment. And if no one has told you this clearly before, let me be the one to say it now. Your age is not a reason to give up on prevention. It is the reason prevention matters more. Your body may not recover the way it did at 25, but it can still respond. It can still stabilize. It can still repair more effectively than it is repairing now. It can still become more resilient than it is today. And that means this is not just information. This is leverage. Use it. Because your body has been listening to your routine for years. From this point forward, give it better instructions.